superpower, tiny little Israel, which hadn't had any energy to speak of its own until then. So together with an American company, Noble Energy, an Israeli-American consortium began developing the Leviathan field, and another Middle East country called Qatar also began emerging as a major exporter of liquefied natural gas from another part of the field in the Persian Gulf that's adjoining to the Iranian field. Unfortunately, I don't have a map to show that, but the same gas field that was discovered in Iranian exclusive economic zone waters in the Persian Gulf extends over to Qatar. And the Qataris, with the help of the British energy companies, developed the liquefied natural gas technology to market this to Asia and ultimately to Western Europe. So, not surprisingly, much of the financing for the mercenaries, and they're not opposition for the most part. These are mercenaries. I was in Tehran in February of this year and interviewed a number of journalists who'd spent months all across Syria interviewing mercenaries, Al-Qaeda, and others fighting against the regime. They are paid $100 a day, which is a king's fortune for many of these poor, unemployed people from they're coming from Chechnya, they're coming from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Libya, where they had excellent combat experience. And they're given Kalashnikovs and $100 a day and told to go in from the Turkish border into Iraq and create terror. And that through the chaos and terror, they're told, we'll back you up and create a regime change against this evil Bashar al-Assad regime. So the financing to the tune of some $5 billion for these mercenary terrorists came from the Emir of Qatar.
So, this is starting to get complicated, but hopefully the bigger picture is starting to emerge in that we have now a number of different parties who are interested in making sure that this Iran-Iraq-Syria pipeline does not go through. Not only Turkey, as I discussed before, but also Israel, which now wants to position itself as an increasingly important energy exporter because of its Leviathan gas field, and also Qatar, which is interested in destabilizing Syria. So Qatar has been one of the places that has been funding the hiring of the jihadist mercenaries and shipping them into Syria to cause part of the destabilization that's going on there. So we're seeing a lot of different agendas overlapping in trying to make sure that this Iran-Iraq-Syria pipeline doesn't take place in the way that that has been planned, and also to make sure that the Assad government is not able to effectively govern Syria, that it basically gets split into these warring factions, exactly as what happened with Iraq, again, going exactly along with that Zionist Greater Israel project and the plan of carving up the Middle East into warring factions that could pose no serious threat to the peace and stability of Israel. So we're starting to see this coming together, and this is where it gets slightly more complicated, but infinitely more fascinating. And I'm going to turn to an absolutely fascinating interview that I conducted just yesterday with Pepe Escobar, of course the roving correspondent for Asia Times Online at atimes.com, and someone that I often turn to as a absolute fount of geopolitical knowledge, and he certainly did not disappoint in this latest interview. I will put the link in the show notes so that you can go and listen to the interview in its entirety. I suggest you do so because it truly does connect a lot of these dots. And as I say, the picture becomes more complicated, but much more fascinating, as it turns out that, of course, Saudi Arabia also has its finger in the Syrian pie through the figure in Saudi Arabian international politics who keeps cropping up again and again, even when we think he's dead, as recently was reported, even on the New World Next Week. And I'm talking about Prince Bandar Bush, as he's probably more well known to the listeners out there. And people who don't know much about his background, I'm hoping to put together a video report on that in the coming days and weeks. weeks, so I'll have more to say about that. But for people who do know Prince Bandar and who know that he was reported as being dead just a year ago, and then popping up in Russia in a picture with Vladimir Putin, and now being more and more implicated in what's happening in Syria, this is just an absolutely incredible piece of information. So let's turn to that interview with Pepe Escobar, where he lays this out in relation to all of the other geopolitics and geostrategic interests that are coalescing in Syria. And I want to draw people's attention specifically to an article that was on Asia Times last month that I think was pretty prescient in that it predicted that the status quo would have to be changed pretty soon. And that was an article called War Against Iran, Iraq, and Syria. And this concentrates on something that I think is a much more reasonable idea for what this is really about, other than a chemical weapons attack. And that is the pipelines. As we've talked about on this program before, a lot of this comes down to the pipeline politics that is increasingly hardwiring geopolitical relations onto the grand chessboard. And this is no exception, with a memorandum of understanding having recently been signed between Iran, Iraq, and Syria for a new gas pipeline that really could potentially change the game if it was allowed to proceed. Let's tell people about this pipeline and this memorandum of understanding that was just signed.
Okay, this is absolutely essential. It's the Iran-Iraq-Syria pipeline, which even in some parts of the Middle East, they call it, with a little bit of sense of humor, in fact, the Islamic pipeline. Not exactly, right? But this is absolutely essential for two reasons. One, it bypasses two of the nations who are absolutely keen on regime change in Syria, Turkey and Qatar. The whole thing with Qatar, as we all know, changed completely for the past few weeks, in fact, for the past 2 months. Don't forget that until 2 months ago, Qatar was being hailed all over, not only in the Middle East, but even some parts of Europe and in DC, as the next mini superpower. They were everywhere. Their foreign policy was everywhere. Their cash was everywhere. They were buying everything legally, like real estate in London and Paris, and illegally, like mercenaries all over the Middle East to fight in Syria. But then the emir is gone. He deposes himself, which is a story that is absolutely impossible to confirm with any official sources in Doha. But we can get around it. We can talk to people in Iraq. We can talk to people in the Emirates, traveling Saudis, you name it. And the picture is that essentially he was invited to depose himself because of Saudi pressure. This Saudi pressure was applied by Bandar Bush, Bandar bin Sultan, former ambassador in Washington, the capo of the al-Qapi in the Afghan jihad in the 1980s, very close to the Bush family, the Carlyle group. We all know this story. So Bandar Bush was not dead. We thought that he had been dead for a year. We all remember that, since that attempt against him in July 2012. He resurfaced 1 year later, and his first photo 1 year later is shaking the hands of Vladimir Putin in Moscow. This is a story that I think a lot of people are already familiar with. The famous 4-hour and something meeting between Bandar and Putin, where essentially Bandar was trying to sell to Putin the idea that if you start opposing a UN resolution, a UN Security Council resolution, and he backed off in terms of supporting Assad, well, the Saudis would start buying, for starters, $15 billion in Russian weapons, with more contracts following. They would not interfere with, very important, pipelines, with Russian pipelines going to Europe, which means basically the Nord Stream and the South Stream, so which is ridiculous. And Putin already said that to Bandar straight away, look, we don't have a problem with that, unless you sabotage our pipelines, right? And obviously, after 4.5 hours, when he was not getting what he wanted, which was Putin's, okay, Assad is toast, he said, and this is quoted verbatim from the leak. The leak was from a Russian diplomat. You went to, very funny, you went to an Arabic newspaper first, Al Safir in Lebanon, then it was translated into English, and then it was circulating all over. It's a completely crazy story. But it makes portions of the dialogue make sense completely, considering the way Bandar articulates himself, and Putin's responses as well. But now in the end, to sum it all up, he said, look, there's going to be a problem for you with the Sochi Olympics. I'm going to release the jihadis that we control. He said blatantly, we control all these Chechens. And not only the Chechens who are in Syria or trafficking between Iraq and Syria, but the Chechens in the Caucasus itself. And Bandar says explicitly, we run all these people, just like he ran 98% of the Mujahideen in the 80s in Afghanistan. So, on the other hand, they had an agreement on Egypt, because Putin is very much afraid of the Muslim Brotherhood, all over, supported by Qatar, obviously. So getting rid of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt was okay for Russia. But this Assad business, forget it. The pipeline business, completely stupid, because Russia is in control of all this. They have strategic partnership with Germany. They're building Nord Stream and the South Stream. There's no way the Saudis are going to interfere with that. And they don't even have gas to sell to Europe. Qatar has gas to sell to Europe. And that's the introduction for us to start talking about Iran, Iraq, Syria pipeline. So in the end, Bandar threatened Putin, saying literally, there's only a military solution for Syria left. This is what we are watching now. So this is the Saudi part of the BBB axis, let's put it this way. Bandar, Bibi, and Barack Obama. It's the 3B axis, in fact. And this joke is, by the way, circulating all over the Middle East already, you know. So, so what happened with Qatar? So with Bandar pushing, pressing especially, the Obama administration, telling, look, Qatar, it's ridiculous. In a phone call, he actually said, Qatar is 300 people at the TV station, which is not very far from the truth. You know, I go to Qatar every year, and that's it. And the people that I talk to, that I get information from, are Egyptian documentary filmmakers, Somali guards. Never anybody from the government is going to ask me my questions. Never. Oh, answer my question. Never. So anyway, Bandar impressed to the Obama administration, look, I am in charge now. King Abdullah told me that I have free hand in Syria. I'm the director of Saudi intelligence. I'm going to run this whole show, and I don't want this upstart